Okay, so here we have a fire hand, and this is evident by the rectangular palm and the short fingers. The fingers are short. We determine this because they are not longer than 7/8 of the palm's length or longer. And I can tell you now that this is certainly a fire hand. These are short fingers. They're not the shortest. This is certainly someone who is a capable thinker, but they are more of a doer than they are a thinker. Generally, people fall into one of the two categories. And there's a lot of fiery elements to this hand, as in the headline. It's well, okay. The headline, it doesn't start as high as I've seen it on a lot of hands, but it's not low either. And generally speaking, the higher the headline starts on the hand, the more ambitious. And ambition is a key sort of trait in fire hands. They're very motivated, self-motivated, very ambitious people. They're doers, as I say, they're workaholics. Often they'll leave things till the last moment. Sometimes they'll jump in and steal the limelight, or take credit for someone else's actions. They are highly inspirational and motivated people, and fire has obsessed man since forever. And so when we see someone who is talented, who is operating in a way that is impressive, or somehow achieving things that we wish to achieve, it's inspiring and motivating. And so fire hands are constantly looking for things to motivate themselves. So they're often very sort of excitement driven, adventure driven. They are, because they're just constantly doing, they're constantly on the move. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. Being like the element itself, fire is constantly moving. And because of that, the fire types can be a little bit destructive, because sometimes they have a tendency to leave that destruction in their wake, but sometimes that's sort of necessary. Sometimes fire hands will say things that others just can't. They are very often enthusiastic, passionate, spontaneous, all of these kind of fast moving, sort of hot sort of traits about a characteristic. And these traits, these characteristics, are just so often why fire hands are in the limelight and constantly striving to better themselves, to motivate themselves. And as I say, one of the key traits, being fire, they're highly ambitious. And this is seen in this person's hand by the fate line. It shows a great sense of drive, a passionate sense of purpose and ambition, and this is a key characteristic of the fire hand. Luna is well developed, and the headline has a nice curve. See how just towards the end of the headline it curves down, pointing towards this rich well of imagination here. And this sort of curvature of the headline, it really is just a wonderful sign of creativity. There's a lot of practicality here. It's straight for a long time, and then it sort of trails off. So, it's a wonderful blend of practical, sort of pragmatic thinking, lateral thinking, but then with this ability to think outside of the conventions and dip into the unconscious. And the unconscious thinking is extremely useful for when we least expect it. So this quick thinking, quick reflexes, that's what unconscious thinking is useful for. So someone with a large or well-developed luna, and we can see that because it's ever so slightly sort of bulbous here, and you can see by the color of the image, that it's well developed, with the headline dipping into it here as well. These are signs that this is someone who is a highly unconscious thinker, which is someone who's got excellent reflexes, and this is also seen by the very rounded fingertips as well. Now the fingers on the left hand, notice how Saturn and Apollo are very close together. This shows a people person, someone who's very social. And again, this is another key characteristic of the fire hand. They're very social people. You see it on the right hand as well. This person with family, friends, and in the workplace, they're very social people. And being social probably plays into their ability to step up in the world, to progress and to get promoted. There is a lot more to say about this fate line as it drives up towards the headline. It begins to thin and change course entirely, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit, but I wanted to just sort of get the chirognomy out of the way first. So on the left hand, notice how Mercury and Apollo are very far apart here. And this is unconscious sort of finger leaning. And on the right hand, yeah, still some sort of space there, but not nearly as far apart. And this may show that this person is having potential sort of relationship or family issues. The left hand is what's internal, the right hand is physical, what's external. So it might be that this person has almost sort of stronger relationships outside of their home environment, perhaps, or perhaps they're just sort of seeking a bit of privacy at this time. And on the left hand also, Jupiter is further away than on the right hand from Saturn. And this shows, I mean, really what this is showing, the indication here is you can see it by Saturn leaning towards Apollo on the left hand. This person is thinking and feeling very strongly about they're relying on their talents, but they're also thinking and feeling very strongly about their environment as well, at home, family. They're thinking about family. So these two in conjunction, these two signs here, the chirognomy is telling me that this person is potentially having some problems at home at the moment. I mean, another interpretation could be that there's more alignment on the right hand here, the fingers are straighter, whereas this sort of curvature on the left hand shows that there was, left hand is sometimes the past, right hand present or future, and it can be an interpretation here, so there's a second interpretation, that actually in fact this person was thinking a lot more about their family. They were working very hard to make ends meet, to ensure that they have enough on the table, enough for the future, enough to provide, whereas now these issues have resolved, or they're thinking a lot less about these things. It's just a matter of interpretation, and we can find out more in the chirology. The Mercury finger is strong. It's very strong, and by strong I mean it's wide. It's a good thickness, and actually it's thicker than Jupiter. And this is, I wouldn't say this is kind of an uncommon sign in a person's hand, whatever the element. Earth hands tend to have a very sort of chunky, short Jupiter finger. To have this kind of Mercury finger is more in line with an air quality. This is more of an air quality. The length of the Mercury finger, Mercury is a little bit low set, only just, but it's long, and this doesn't necessarily mean that they're an able verbal communicator. I've seen a long Mercury finger like this on the hand of someone who's unable to speak entirely. It shows a strong ability to express, and an expression is a form of communication. It's, communication and expression are just, they're two huge words. There's so much underneath both of those. So that, in line with what we see here, this person's career kind of relying on talents, or perhaps was and isn't now. It could be, these two, taking all of this into account, that this is a very creative person. And I know this person quite well, or used to some degree. And so I already know a lot about this person anyway, but I'm just sort of saying what I see the hands telling me, if that makes sense. The first phalanges of all of the fingers are, well, in particular, these three Mercury, Apollo and Saturn are very long. And this shows someone who's actually quite spiritual. And so each of these really mean different things in their own right. The Mercury finger is the finger of learning, communication, expression, memory, and the long first phalanx of Mercury shows a love of learning and love of science, and trying to continually find ways to better understand and to then express that, to pass that information on. Now, the rounded tip of Mercury also kind of shows the sense of a heightened sort of spirit, rather than someone who is a talker. This is someone who understands quite sort of spiritually, instinctively, rather than logically, if that makes sense. Unconsciously, they pick up on a lot of things. And again, this on Apollo, the long first phalanx, it's not the longest, but it is long. And it shows a sense of understanding all things sort of artistic and naturally beautiful. A keen sort of intuitive sense of what looks right, feels right, sounds right. And pay close attention here, because the Apollo finger, it's ever so slightly spatulate, especially on the right hand. You notice Saturn, it's sort of just rounded, and so is Mercury. Jupiter's conic, but Apollo is spatulate. It's ever so slightly sort of wider at the tip, and it shows that a person has, how can I put this, attention to artistic movement, and that can be creativity within anything that moves. Or timing as well. Timing is a great one. So, if we see a particular sort of angle here and the headline forks, this person might have a flair for writing. If we saw a career line that was stemming heavily out of Luna, you might see, along with this forking headline, you might see an actor. Timing is useful in a lot of artistic industries. In fact, you could argue every. But in particular, music, and in other ways to express yourself, like sports. The spatulate Apollo in particular is helpful for anyone that is working in a field of movement, animation. Really, anyone with a spatulate Apollo, and this is not the most spatulate Apollo I've ever seen, but it is worthy of noting. It shows originality. So the long Saturn, first phalanx of Saturn, shows an aptitude to best use energy correctly, to be efficient around work, and making sure that nothing, I don't want to say nothing is wasted, it's more around planning and being quite sort of prudent. And the Jupiter finger being pointed like this is, and I've said this a lot actually because I see it quite a lot, it shows someone who is enjoys breaking down information and passing that information on. It shows a teacher, someone who is very good at delegating that information. Jupiter's authority and judgment and decision making. So it shows someone who is who enjoys sort of explaining things. And I'm not sure this was always the case, because it's not as pointy on the left hand. And the other thing I just want to pick up on quickly before I move on with the chirognomy aspects of this reading, the two middle fingers are a little bit woundly, a little bit close together, a little bit, maybe just a touch too close together. And again, this is a sign of perhaps there's a feeling of being sort of stuck in a rut at the moment. The thumb here, it's quite a long thumb. It easily reaches the halfway mark of the third phalanx of Jupiter, and that shows us someone who is a deep thinker And also the knots here at the second join are all, they're a bit knotty. This shows an analytical thinker. So although this is a fire hand and this is a doer rather than a thinker, there are some elements of this person kind of getting in their own head a little bit. Now, in terms of the chirology, there's quite a lot going on here. I've got, in particular, quite a bit of clarity on the right hand. You can even see the skin ridge patterns quite nicely. And, generally you'll see a whirl fingerprint pattern on Apollo on a fire hand. That's quite common. And I would have thought with this person being so creative that this person has that. I can't see, I've not got the clarity, but there is a bit of a tented loop here on the Jupiter finger, and that shows a kind of a combination of flexibility and a willingness to accept and follow the rules. It shows quite a lot of order but adaptability at the same time. Someone who's definitely going to make sure the job gets done, but there is also a little bit of room to bend the rules and to take pressure. Now, one of the key things here I'm noticing, I'm picking up on is, well, there's a couple of things. Firstly, that's kind of, it's a strange one to me. It kind of feels a bit like a Ring of Solomon, which shows I'm not sure it is, but it's unusual. If it is, it's very high up there on the hand. A Ring of Solomon is someone who has an inclination, an aptitude, an idea, an understanding, innate sort of wisdom, with particular the sort of occult arts. And I've seen signs similar to this, at least on the palm of someone else who was very interested in learning more about the esoteric arts. But one of the things that I really pick up on here is this Girdle of Venus. Now, the Girdle of Venus in medieval palmistry was was always associated with pimps, drug dealers, prostitutes, people on the seedy side of life, people that likely didn't have much of a fate line, as in no real kind of purpose, drifters, criminals, vagabonds. But what we know now about the Girdle of Venus is, it's a lot more sort of complicated than that, and it's just not true, really. I just want to get that across. The Girdle of Venus kind of acts as a secondary heart line, and it creates extra sort of emotional sensitivity, extra kind of emotional awareness. Now, when we see a fully formed Girdle of Venus, it shows someone with a hypersensitivity, maybe even a hypochondriac, someone who is too sensitive. I mean, there's kind of a stigma attached to that word sensitive, because it's not necessarily a bad thing, especially when utilized. But this Girdle of Venus is broken, as we can see here, and that's actually a good thing. It's one of the few times in palmistry that a broken line is a good thing, because had this girdle not been broken like this person would really struggle with their emotions, actually. And it's quite interesting to me because this girdle, it kind of breaks away and points towards the lifeline at this age here. And this is the age of around about 23. So, and it's where they really start to claim their independence as well. So for me, I'm going to interpret this as this person really finding their feet at this time. It's almost as though something happened, something quite profound happened at this time that allowed them to understand their emotional makeup to a point where they could kind of almost break away from getting in their own head. And at that same time, the lifeline pulls away from the headline, and it's quite sort of profound here. But before this time, there were great ambitions for this person at a young age, about the age of 14. And these ambitions were just connected to a time around about 24, 25 maybe. So that same ambition, 14, 10 years later, maybe 11 years later, there's a connection there. So I'm wondering, because you actually see a bit of a triangle formed, I'm not doing a good job here, formed out of the lifeline and the headline because of some drive and motivation. Inner Mars is drive and motivation. But it's also connected to this ambition. This ambition line that drives its way up onto Jupiter. But from 14 to around about 22, it seems this was actually a period of great difficulty for this person. And as I have said, I do know this person to some degree, but I've read the palms of many people I know and always discovered things I never knew. And when I discuss these things, you think you know someone and things come out. So I'm not entirely certain what this was, but this was a period of great difficulty for this person. So in palmistry there are two family rings. One of them is on the thumb and the other is the Mercury finger, right above the attachment lines, or marriage lines as they're sometimes referred to, or relationship lines. And islands that develop on the family ring represent children. And the reason why islands are bad generally in palmistry, it's a blocking of the flow of the energies. Think of a river dividing and creating flowing around a lump of soil that kind of grows. An island is represented as children on the family ring because it's a disruption. Children are hard work. You'll get a lot less sleep. Your money goes nowhere. It's upheaval, and so it's an obstruction to the flow, to that environment, to the path of that particular area. And so that's why children kind of show up as an island. And you can see it here, although it's a little bit faint. There is an island here. I don't solely rely on the family ring for counting children, because it's not all that reliable. No one method in palmistry is reliable, which is why we should never diagnose or conclude by one sign or symptom alone. So the other place is the attachment line, and you can see here this is a very strong relationship, and just zooming in here can actually see just about a second line here. And this doesn't mean, okay, this person has two children. What this means is it's the potential for two children. It could actually be two miscarriages. It could be that this person used contraception and never even knew that these occasions occurred. This is the two possibilities for children. Sometimes these supposed children lines, and some people refer to these as fate lines, rising from the union itself, the relationship itself. Sometimes they're actually represented by pets. Sometimes people who live alone have these kinds of children lines. It's lots of them, and yet they don't have any children. They've never had them, but they adore their pets, and they have the same number of children lines as pets. That does happen, but the lines really display how we show what we feel. So I would say there are two children here, and then the second family ring is just above these attachment lines, and you can see the islands that develop here and here. And so again, you've got a sign of two children there, or the possibility for two children. Now, the career line is an interesting one because it starts off, I mean, look, it starts off almost before this person was born. And it's a curious one. This person has had drive from the moment that they drew breath. They have always been someone who is just constantly on the move. It's really interesting that this escape line here, this need, this drive to get away, it kind of coincides with where the lifeline meets the fate line. That's interesting. This is round about the age of 15 where the escape line crosses the fate line. Perhaps it was 14. Consider this ambition line that rises up here at the age I mentioned before. 14 is very similar. So perhaps it's 14 here, or perhaps it's 15, where this corresponds to this escape here, this need to get away. For this person in their life, there will be a second point where there's a need to get away. A second point in their life where there will be a need for this. And this is, I feel, is going to happen where this lifeline actually points towards this escape line, because it's hard to explain, but the fate line is read up the hand, the lifeline is read down the hand, and so this here is actually two events in one, if that makes sense. It's a really weird one, but for me, the fate line, it's really strong, and it kind of changes direction after mid-20s, as you know, evidenced by the lifeline. But as it reaches the headline, there's a bit of a blip here. I don't know if you can see it. It's almost like an island here. It's not the strongest, but the headline as well, there's a bit of a blip, and I'm thinking that this was a period of poor mental health for this person. I'm not entirely certain what happened here. You can see emotions kind of relate to this as well, but this really affected their career. But at this time, 35, this is a karmic year for this person, as is 15. At this time, there's a feeling to kind of start anew, to start a different role, and it's working alongside their current role. So it's not as though they want to make a great change and step away from what they're doing necessarily, but they want to change things up in terms of doing something else alongside what they're doing. And it kind of, the direction that it comes from, it's a few twists and turns, so it's not plain sailing, and there might be some financial ups and downs, but the direction that it comes from, it's sort of coming from central plane of Mars, which could be business orientated. Oh, it's a weird one. This decision, in any case, to pursue a secondary path in life is directly connected with their success, and the success line is in there's more than one, which shows more than one income, and there's a need to protect here. We've got a square here after the age of 56, but we'll get to that. So at 42 there will be some sort of temptation, and we can see that this is connected to their environment as well. But notice how this is not connected here, and notice how the fate line, both fate lines, two fate lines by the way, show an extra ambition, extra drive, another key characteristic of a fire hand. Notice how the fate lines are not disheartened. Look, they're still strong. So whatever this temptation is, and it's likely connected to matters of the heart, it won't sway this person. I don't need to advise this person to stick to the straight and narrow, because I know they already will. And as I say, there are some ups and downs here, financially speaking, with this secondary role, but it's strong enough to overtake the primary kind of path, life path, because this person makes a decision to continue this sort of secondary role, this role that they began around about the age of 35, 36. And it's not as stable, it's not as reliable, it's not as strong. Reliable is probably the right word. So I'm not entirely sure this is the best idea. I think it's always wise to have that plan A was just so solid. It might have been boring. It might not have earned as much. But, you know, this excitement the fire hand craves is sometimes the downfall. And this could be potential here for some downfall. Because this success, you know, you've got more than one path, but it's not one. Nothing is better than one strong, clear line, because it's focused energy. It's a focused path without obstacle, without obstruction. And what we have here is something a little bit shakier than that. And the success lines, there's more than one, but they're not strong. And sometimes when you have too many irons in the fire, you know, your results aren't as lucrative in the long run. And after around about the age of 55, 56, there's a need to protect finances here. And the career kind of stops at the girdle, you know, and it does continue again afterwards, not for some time, and then we see a secondary success line pick up. Career, and this is strong in this area up here, but there's a big gap here. So I'm thinking that due to potential kind of emotional decisions, that's where this person really needs to be careful around their finances. Don't make financial decisions connected to anything emotional, ever. I mean, I suppose that's good advice for anyone, really. But there's a feeling here that there's something connected. There's some sort of emotional barrier to work. And this this protection is good. It's always a good sign. But after it, it's kind of, what I want to see is this. But we don't see that. And it might well be that by the time this person reaches this age, this all strengthens up. I mean, you can kind of see the beginnings of it there. So I'm not going to worry about it too much. This is a little off just yet for this person. And actually, this secondary career line from 35 right up to 55 is, you know, it's acting almost as a square in itself. This temptation is almost sort of warded off by this sort of outside influence in some way. This emotional temptation I was talking about, I might be wrong about that, could actually be when the lifeline is connected to the heart like this, it could, and it's stronger at the heart. This could be hospitalization. This person needs to be careful at this point in their life right here. Let's see. Yep, it's 42. So we got the years 15, 35 or 36, and 42 as karmic years. 56, forgive me, again is another year where finances particularly need to be careful. So 42, be careful with your health. 56, be careful with your finances. And you can see that on the left hand, you've got stronger success than on the right. And that's always a sign that this person is, you know, there's obligations at home. Money comes in and money goes out. And it's kind of disheartening. But palmistry is not a one-off thing. I'm expecting to see this person's hands again in a few years' time at the very least. And I think we're going to see some changes here. The lines change all the time, and the lines never lie. Only we have that capability. It's only a matter of interpretation. So I could have, and I may well have, a few things wrong here, but it's only through my mistakes that I can learn, as with many of us. So I want to know what your thoughts are on this reading, and whether or not you feel I got things wrong, or if you've got similar signs, if you know a fire hand, if you are, and you've got similar things going on here. Let me know what your thoughts are, and I'm looking forward to hearing what other people think. So thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.